Welcome to Heart Over Gold, the channel where love, kindness, and humanity shine brighter than any fortune. In today's story, Issa Monroe believed her life with billionaire husband Julian Vaughn was untouchable. Marriage built on luxury, loyalty, and the promise of family. But when Issa went into labor alone, the truth unraveled. While she fought for their child in a hospital room, Julian was thousands of miles away on the Amalfi Coast with his mistress, Elena Santoro. By her side stood only her sister, Sophie, who witnessed Issa's heartbreak turn into resolve. When Julian finally returned home, expecting forgiveness, Issa was ready with something else entirely, the papers that would end their marriage forever. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments and keep up with our latest stories. What do you do when the man who vowed to stand beside you through every storm is basking in paradise with another woman while you're fighting the hardest battle of your life? For Issa Monroe, this wasn't a nightmare. It was her reality. In one corner of the world, Issa was confined to a stark hospital room, her body racked with the pain of labor. Across the globe, her billionaire husband, Julian Vaughn, lounged on the Amalfi Coast with his mistress, sipping wine under the Italian sun. He believed his fabrications were flawless, as seamless as the sunset he admired. He was wrong. His retreat was about to shatter. His carefully built world was about to ignite. The silence inside their Verona penthouse was oppressive, almost alive. It hung in the air like an unseen weight, settling over the glossy marble floors and steel fixtures. Issa, 9 months and 6 days pregnant, felt that silence pressing on her chest. From her place on the designer sofa, she gazed out at the bustling piazza below, its greenery stark against the cold grey of the city. A view worth millions, a view meant to symbolize success. Today, it only made her feel trapped like a fragile doll in a gilded cage. Julian moved briskly through their vast bedroom, packing with the same ruthless precision he applied to boardroom deals. At 42, he was the golden face of Novatech, square jaw, storm grey eyes, and a magnetic charm that bent reality to his will. He had convinced the world that his empire was built on innovation, not intrusion. He had convinced Issa that his constant trips were sacrifices for their future. "It's just Milan, Ellie," he called, adjusting the strap of an expensive watch. Dressed in a tailored Tom Ford suit, he emerged with polished ease. One last handshake for the Helios steel contract. "I'll be back before you can miss me." Issa smoothed a hand over her belly, where her son shifted restlessly. "The doctor said it could happen any time, Julian. He told you not to travel anymore." Julian knelt in front of her, his cologne filling the air. His thumb stroked over her knuckles with practiced tenderness. "The moment you call, I'll be on the first jet back. You have my word." His eyes radiated sincerity, his expression a flawless mask of concern. He was very good, too good. For 5 years, Issa had built her life around that performance. She had been the ideal wife, graceful, loyal, patient, ignoring the late nights, the hushed phone calls, the scent of unfamiliar perfume. She had explained it away as the burden of his world, the price of living at the top. But pregnancy sharpened her instincts, awakening an intuition she couldn't dismiss. And now, that instinct screamed. "Milan, huh?" she asked lightly. "And who exactly are you meeting?" "Mr. Tanaka," Julian replied without missing a beat. His gaze lingered a fraction too long, a tell Issa would have overlooked in the past. He kissed her quickly, dry, dismissive. "Don't worry, Sophie's on her way. You won't be alone. He grabbed his leather carry-on. I love you. I love you too, she whispered to his retreating figure. The words tasting like ashdot. The door clicked shut, and silence filled the void. Her laptop felt icy under her trembling fingers as she searched. She wasn't spying, just confirming. Using a trick her journalist sister Sophie had taught her, Issa checked the tail number of Julian's private jet. The truth hit her like a physical blow. The plane wasn't bound for Milan, it was headed for Amalfi. The word spun in her mind. Malfi, not a boardroom. Not business. Honeymoons, lovers, escapes. The lie was deliberate, and this time impossible to ignore. A contraction ripped through her body, stealing her breath. Instinct told her it was the real thing. She reached for her phone, thumb hovering over Julian's name, then stopped. What would he give her? More lies, more of the same. Her phone buzzed. Sophie, relief washed through her. I'm almost there, Sophie said, voice sharp and steady. We'll get you to the hospital, then we'll deal with him. Hours later, Issa lay in the delivery room at Chiron Salud Roma, contractions hitting like tidal waves. Sophie was beside her, protective, furious. Messages to Julian went unanswered. Voicemails, empty texts, until finally a single response appeared, just landed. Long day of meetings. Will call when I can. Hugs to Issa. Issa stared at the words. Cold, distant, fake. He was still pretending to be in Milan, still lying while she bled and screamed through childbirth. Sophie's jaw tightened. He's with someone Issa already knew. Amalfi wasn't. A solo escape. And then Sophie found proof. Julian's assistant, Alina Santoro. Blonde, ambitious, and far too comfortable in Julian's orbit. Issa had noticed before, dismissed it before. But the final blow came on Alina's Instagram story, a pool, champagne flutes, 2 sets of feet in the water, hers and Julian's. One word caption, paradise. The hospital room went cold. Issa's world collapsed. She released a broken cry part, grief, part rage. Sophie's voice was steel. This wasn't an accident, Ellie. She wanted you to see it. This is a declaration of war. She posted it to her public story, not her close friends. She tagged the location. She knew someone would find it. She's forcing him to react. Another contraction tore through Isla, more powerful than any before, Chas screamed, arching her back. The physical pain, a welcome distraction from the agony that threatened to drown her. A nurse rushed in, her face a mask of professional concern. It's okay, Issa. Your blood pressure is rising. I need you to breathe with me. The nurse soothed, but Issa couldn't breathe. She was suffocating under the weight of it all. The lies, the years of willful ignorance, the image of those 2 pairs of feet in the water. Her perfect golden cage hadn't just been a cage. It had been a stage for a play where she was the fool. Sophie took her hand, her grip fierce. Listen to me, Ellie. Forget him. He doesn't exist. Right now, it's you and your children. That's all that matters. You are going to get through this, and you are going to be a mother. And when this is over, we will deal with him. I promise you. Issa looked at her sister, at the absolute loyalty burning in her eyes. She squeezed her hand back, a surge of adrenaline, piercing through the pain. Sophie was right. Julian had made his choice. He had chosen paradise with his mistress over the birth of his own child. Now it was her turn to choose her. She could fall apart or she could fight. Get me a lawyer, Soph, Issa said through gritted teeth as another contraction began. Not just any lawyer. Get me the best. Get me a shark. Sophie's lips curled into a grim smile. I know just the one, Valentina Rossi. She doesn't just get you a divorce. She gets you vengeance. As the doctor walked in to tell her it was time to push, Isla closed her eyes. She wasn't just pushing to bring her son into the world. She was pushing out the old Ella, the trusting wife, the silent partner, and in her place, a new woman was being born. One forged in the fires of betrayal and galvanized by a mother's righteous fury. Julian Vaughan had no idea what was waiting for him when he came home. Have you ever felt so betrayed that you just wanted to watch world of the person who hurt you burn? Do you believe vengeance is a valid form of justice, a new dawn? The first cry of her newborn son cut through the cacophony of beeping machines and medical jargon. It was the most pure sound Isla had ever heard. They laid Haim in her chest, a small reddish squirming miracle, and in that instant the world shrank to the space of her own and his tiny heartbeats. He was here, he was real, he was hers. She named him Leo after her grandfather, a man of quiet strength and unshakably integrity. Everything his father was not. Holding Leo, Issa felt a profound shift within her. The heartbreak was still there, an open wound, but it was no longer feel-consuming emotion. It had knit together and was being rapidly overshadowed by a fierce, protective love, as elemental as granite. This perfect little being was completely deepened. On her, she was his entire world, and she would not allow him to be raised in the shadow of lies and deceit. Sophie had been a rock, holding her hand, whispering encouragement and capturing the first moments of Leo's life on her phone. Not for Julian, but for Isla. While Isla rested and a nurse helped her with the baby, Sophie stepped out into his hallway. Her fingers danced across her phone screen as she made the call thought would change everything. Rossi City Law Office. The voice on the other end always crisp and professional. My name is Sophie Martin. I need to speak to her urgently. It's a personal matter on behalf of my sister, Issa Monroe. Her husband is Julian Vaughan. The mention after his names worked like a key in a lock. There was a brief hold. Then a new voice came on the line. A low, smooth voice that radiated an almost unsettling level of authority. This is Valentina Rossi. Ms. Rossi, Sophie began. My sister just gave birth to her son. Her husband, Julian Vaughan, is currently on the Amalfi Coast with his executive assistant, a woman named Alina Santoro. He told my sister he was in Milan on business. We have proof of the affair and his vocation. Issa wants to file for divorce. There was a pause. Sophie could almost hear the gears turning in the legendary lawyer's mind. Valentina Rossi, known in elite Romy circles as the Shark, had handled the most contentious, high-profile divorces in the city. She was brilliant, ruthless, and impossibly expensive. She didn't just win cases, she eviscerated her opponents. Does he know you are aware of the situation? Valentina asked. No, he's completely in the dark. He thinks we're still buying his Milan story. And the proof. Time-stamped photos from the Mistress public Instagram account, geo-tagged to the Amalfi Coast, a copy of the jet's flight log, and a string of text messages from him lying about his whereabouts while my sister was in active labor. Excellent, Valentina, said the word cutting through the line. Tell your sister to rest. Tell her not to contact him under any circumstances. No angry texts, no tearful phone calls, complete and total silence. He must not hear a thing from her. Am I clear, Crystal? Sophie replied. I'll have a retainer agreement sent to the hospital in less than an hour. My team is already pulling every financial document relative to Mr. Vaughan that we can get our hands on. Let him enjoy his vacation. It will be his last. Meanwhile, in a 5,000 a night private villa at the Hotel Marantoon, the Amalfi Coast, Julian Vaughan was duoing, indeed enjoying himself. He floated on his back in the infinity pool, a cold San Miguel beer sweating in his hand. The tropical sun warmed his skin. Alina Santoro, in a tiny bikini, swam over and wrapped her arms around his neck. You seem tense, she purred, kissing his chin, still thinking of boot work. Just feeling a little guilty, that's all. Julian sighed, pulling her closer. Isa could go into labor at any time. Alina rolled her eyes, a calculate flush of annoyance. In her blue eyes, Julian, we've talked about this. Yowzef. This, you've worked your butt off for a year. What has she done? Planned a few dinner parties. Her biggest stress is picking out baby room furniture. You needed a real break with Simeon, who understood your world. Her words were a comforting balm to his conscience. Alina was smart, ambitious, and made him feel like the king he believed himself to be. Isa, especially during the pregnancy, had become a different, softer, more focused on the baby, less on him and his empire. It was boring. I know, it's just bad timing. There's never a perfect time, she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Isn't it time you stopped feeling guilty? You and I are the truth. She's just an obligation. A beautiful, expensive obligation you have already outgrown. This was the narrative Alina had been spinning for months. This wasn't just an affair. She was his intellectual and spiritual partner. She had positioned herself as his savior, the only one who truly understood the burdens of his genius. She had orchestrated this trip, convincing him it was necessary. She had even been the one to subtly suggest he tell Issa he was going to Milan, a place that sounded more like work and less like pleasure. And she had been the one to post the Instagram story. It was a calculated risk. She knew Julian's world was hermetically sealed. He assumed no one in their Rome circle would be looking at his assistant's social media. But Alina knew better. In the digital age, there were no secrets. She had seen the way Eli's sister looked at her, though in disguised suspicion. She was counting on Sophie to be her unwitting messenger. Alina no longer wanted to be a secret. She wanted to be the next Mrs. Julian Vaughan. This was her power move. I should probably call, Julian said, heaving himself out of the pool and reaching for his phone. He saw the string of missed calls and text messages from Sophie. A cold jolt of panic shot through him. He opened the last one. Where the hell are you? Damn it, he muttered. What is it? Alina asked, finding concern. Eyes in labor. Sophie's been texting me for hours. He began to pace the pool deck, his mind racing. Why didn't you get this sooner? The service here is terrible, remember, Alina said smoothly, having already anticipated this. You said so yourself. He quickly typed a reply. His hands were shaking slightly. He couldn't fly back to Rome with an Amalfi Coast tan. He needed to keep the lie going. Just saw these. My phone was off, in meetings all day. This is incredible news. How is she? Has the baby arrived yet? On my way to the airport now. Tell her and the baby I love them, and I'm on my way. He hit send, the lie flowing from him with practiced ease. He turned to Alina. I have to go. The jet needs tow refueled. I need a flight plan back to Rome, but with a layover first. Somewhere cold, Oslo. Elena suggested, a sly smile on her lips. You could say the Milan meeting ran long and you had to reroute through Norway for a side deal. Nobody gets a tan in Oslo. He looked at her. A slow smile spread across his face. God, you're brilliant. He pulled her in and kissed her hard. Pack your things. We'll drop you in Barcelona on the way. I need you back at the office, holding down the fort. Delete everything. All the photos, the hotel bookings off your personal cards. Everything. Don't worry, Elena said, her eyes gleaming with triumph. By the time you land, it will be like the Amalfi Coast never existed. As Julian scrambled to cover his tracks, convinced he was one step ahead, he had no idea that an ocean away, a team of forensic accountants hired by Valentina Rossi was already unearthing the web of shell companies and offshore accounts he used to hide his personal expenses, including the 5-figure cost of the Amalfi villa, paid for not as a personal expense, but as a Novatech corporate retreat. The trap was being set. The shark was circling, and the prey was swimming directly into it. Do you think Julian underestimated the power of a woman's intuition? Or did he simply become overconfident in his own cunning? The fall of the king, the Gulfstream G60 descended through the clouds over Rome, the familiar city skyline rising up Tommy. Julian Vaughan adjusted his tie and ran a hand through his hair. He felt a pang of genuine excitement. He was going to be a father. He imagined walking into the hospital room, flowers in hand, full of apologies about the unavoidable and momentous. Business in Milan. Ella would be tired, but she would forgive him. She always did. He would hold his son for the first time. And this whole messy Amalfi business would be forgotten. A secret kept between him and Elena. He had spent 2 hours on the tarmac in Oslo making a series of frantic, backdated business calls to sell the lie. He'd even bought a cheap airport snow globe as a prop. He was ready. His story was flawless. As Thejit taxied to the private hangar at Barajas Airport, he saw a sleek black car waiting on the tarmac. Good. His driver was here. Everything was going according to plan. The jet door opened and the cool Rome air hit him. He took a deep breath, sliding into the role of the devoted husband returning home to his family. He descended the steps, his leather carry-on in hand. But as he reached the bottom, it wasn't his usual driver who stepped from the car. It was a woman he didn't recognize, dressed in an impeccably cut grey pantsuit, her silver hair pulled back in a severe, elegant bob. Her expression was completely devoid of emotion. Behind her, 2 large men with stone-cold face and dark suits emerged from the vehicle. Julian Vaughan, the woman asked. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the air. Like a shard of glass. Yes, Julian said, confused. Who are you? He looked past her, expecting his driver to appear. My name is Valentina Rossi, she said, her eyes locking with his. I am your wife's attorney. The words hit Julian like a physical blow. Your wife's attorney. The phrase made no sense. Why would Ela have an attorney? An attorney like Valentina Rossi, whose name he knew from the gossip pages, always linked to the city's most brutal legal, corporate, and marital battles. Don't understand, he stammered, his carefully constructed compository beginning to crumble. I think you do, Rossi said. Coolly, she gave a slight nod to one of her men. He stepped forward and handed Julian a thick manila envelope. Julian stared at it, his hand frozen in the air. What is this? That is a summons and complaint for divorce, Valentina stated, her voice flat. On the grounds of adultery, among other things. It also contains a temporary restraining order, preventing you from accessing or transferring any marital assets, and an injunction, barring you from access to the Via Roma residence. You are not to go home, Mr. Vaughan, and you are not to contact my client in any manner. Julian's drilled, adultery, restraining order. How could she know? It was impossible. He had covered his tracks. Alina had deleted everything. This is insane, he spluttered, finally finding his voice. There's been a mistake. My wife just had a baby. I was in Milan on business. I can prove it. He gestured vaguely with the hand holding the Oslo snow globe. Valentina Rossi allowed herself Asmel cold smile. It didn't reach her eyes. Ah, yes, Milan. And I suppose the layover in Oslo was for the polar bear convention. She took another step closer, lowering her voice so only heckled here. Allow me to save you the trouble of further perjury. We have your jet's flight records too. The Amalfi Coast. We have the receipts from the Hotel Marento charged to a shell company as a novotined building exercise. And we have a beautiful high-definition screenshot of Ms. Santoro's Instagram story with your feet enjoying the paradise. You chose instead of attending the birth of your son. Each word was a hammer blow, systematically demolishing his reality. He felt the blood drain from his face. He looked past Rossi, his eyes desperately scanning the area, and that's when he saw them. At the edge, off the private tarmac, just far enough away to be legal, was a small group of photographers. Their long lenses were aimed directly at him. One of them, he recognized, a notorious paparazzi who worked for the gossip pages. And standing near them, watching the scene with an expression of cold satisfaction, was his sister-in-law Sophie. She raised her phone as if to toast him before turning away. He had walked directly into a perfectly executed ambush. You can't do this, he whispered, the words sounding pathetic even to his own ears. Isa, she wouldn't. You have fundamentally misunderstood the woman you married. Mr. Vaughan, Rossi interrupted. You thought she was a decoration. You were wrong. She is the queen, and you have been cast from Feckingdom. She turned, her job done, and walked back to the car without looking back. One of the big men opened the back door for Julian, his expression making it clear this wasn't a request. Numb, Julian slid into the leather seat. The manila envelope felt as if it weighed 100 B. He opened it. His hands were shaking violently. The legal jargon swam before his eyes, but the words were clear. Irreconcilable differences, extreme cruelty, adultery attached with proofs. Exhibit A, a printout of the flight log to the Amalfi Coast. Exhibit B, a copy of the hotel bill. Exhibit C, a crisp color photograph of his Andalena's feet in the infinity pool. The word paradise mocked him. From the bottom of the page, the car pulled away from the hangar, leaving his private jet on the tarmac like a monument to his stupidity. As they headed for the highway, his phone began to vibrate uncontrollably. The screen lit up with notifications. El Pais, the World Corazon magazine, the headlines were brutal. Tech mogul Julian Vaughan served divorce papers on air tarmac amid cheating allegations. Navate, CEO in hot water after skipping son's birth for Amalfi getaway with assistant inside the divorce. Julian Vaughan, a story of lies, luxury and betrayal. He had flown home thinking he was the king returning to his castle, but the locks had been changed. The drawbridge was opened, his kingdom was on fire. He was not a king. He was just a man sitting in the back of a car with an Oslo snow globe. Finally, irrevocably. Do you think Julian got what he deserved? Or was the punishment too severe? How would you have handled the situation if you were Issa? The rise of the Queen. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. The stories fueled by Sophie's anonymous but well-placed leaks and Valentina Rossi's strategic precision created a media storm that Julian Vaughn could not control. The narrative was too compelling. The billionaire mogul, the beautiful wife in labor, the illicit tropical tryst with the young assistant. It was a morality play, fourth modern age, and Julian was cast as the irredeemable villain. The Novatech Board of Directors, a collection of serious-faced men and women who cared more about profit than a good story, called an emergency meeting. The scandal wasn't just a personal embarrassment. It was a direct threat to the company's image. Valentina Rossi had made sure they knew the Amalfi trip was paid for with corporate funds disguised as business expenses. This act of embezzlement, combined with public relations nightmare, was a breach of his fiduciary duty. Novatech's stock price plummeted 20% in 2 days. Before the week was out, Julian Vaughn was forced to take an indefinite leave of absence from the company he had built. He was locked out of his own empire. Elena Santoro disappeared, unceremoniously fired from her position and named in the divorce proceedings. She became a pariah. Her dream of becoming the next Mrs. Vaughan had evaporated. She had lit the match, hoping to warm herself by fire, but had instead been consumed by the inferno. She deactivated her social media and vanished. Her 15 minutes of infamy over Julian holed up in a suite at the Palazzo Hotel tried to fight back. He hired a team of equally ruthless attorneys. They attempted to paint Isla as a vengeful gold digger, but the strategy failed spectacularly. Valentina Rossi was always one step ahead. The case hinged on their prenuptial agreement, which was believed to be ironclad. It guaranteed Isla a generous settlement, but not one that would append his kingdom. But Valentina had found the loophole, a little-known fidelity clause that Julian's own arrogant lawyers had included out of habit. It stated that in the event of proven adultery that led to a public scandal and damaged their family's reputation, the financial limitations of the prenup would be null and void. Julian had signed it without a second thought, never believing he could be caught so flagrantly. It was the ultimate Trojan horse. His own hubris was the weapon that would bring him down. Facing a protracted, humiliating public trial that he was certain to lose, Julian was forced to settle. It was one of the largest divorce settlements in the history of Rome. Illa Monroe was no longer just a millionaire's wife. She was in her own right an exceptionality woman. But Issa cared little for the money itself. For her, it was about justice. It was about security for her son. As the legal battle raged in courtrooms and boardrooms, her world had grown small and wonderfully focused. Her universe was the quiet of the penthouse which the court had granted her and the scent of her baby's skin. It was the soft weight of Leo, sleeping on her chest, his tiny fingers curled around her own. She learned the rhythm of his nights, the language of his cries. She found a strength she never knew she had, a deep well of resilience and love that had lain untapped during her years as Julian's wife. Her sister Sophie was a constant presence, a devoted aunt delighted in making Leo laugh. The silence of the penthouse was no longer oppressive. It was peaceful. The view of the Piazza del Popolo was no longer a symbol of isolation. It was a promise of strolls in the sun, of a future she would build for herself on her own terms. 6 months after that fateful diet at the airport, Issa sat on the same custom-designed sofa where her old life had ended, dressed not in designer evening wear, but in comfortable cashmere, Leo was sleeping soundly in his bassinet beside her. On the coffee table in front of her was not a stack of invitations to social galas, but a business proposal. Using a portion of the settlement, she was establishing a foundation. The Monroe Foundation would be dedicated to providing legal aid and financial support to women and children victimized by powerful men. Women who didn't have a Valentina Rossi to call or the resorcesto fight back. It was a new purpose forged from her pain. Her phone buzzed. It was a news alert. Julian Vaughn had sold his remaining shares in Novarticand, was reportedly relocating to Dubai, a place with no extradition treaties, and a tolerance for disgraced titans. He was a ghost, a whispered warning at cocktail parties. Issa looked at the headline, then dismissed the notification without a second thought. He was a chapter of her life that was now closed. She looked at her son, then back at the proposal in her hands. The sun streamed in through the vast windows, bathing the room in a warm golden light. For the first time in a long time, Issa Monroe felt truly free. She had lost a husband, but she had found herself, and her own rise was just beginning. What does freedom mean to you? Do you believe Issa found true freedom in her new life? The final showdown. 4 years later, Issa Monroe's name was no longer synonymous with scandal, but with power, not the borrowed, reflected power of a millionaire's wife, but a genuine hardened influence she wielded with grace and precision. The Monroe Foundation had grown into a formidable force in Rome philanthropy, a sanctuary and a sword for women navigating the dangerous intersection of domestic strife and financial disparity. Isla was no longer a societal footnote. She was a featured figure in Forbes, celebrated for her strategic acumen and unyielding commitment. The Verona penthouse, once her golden cage, was now her fortress and command center. Leo, now a boisterous, bright 4-year-old with his mother's warm eyes and a stubborn chin she privately admitted came from his father, was the sun in her universe. His life was a happy rhythm of preschool drop-offs, afternoons in the Piazza del Lopo, and quiet evenings filled with picture books and sprawling Lego creations on the marble floors. He knew nothing of the Amalfi Coast, of restraining orders, of the man whose DNA he shared. For Leo, his world was complete. It consisted of his mother, his Aunt Sophie, and a loving circle of friends. Julian Vaughn was not a ghost in their home. He wasn't even a memory. On a crisp autumn afternoon, Isla was at the Foundation's downtown office, a modern, sleek space, a world away from the opulent sterility of Novatech. She was deep in a file, a particularly nasty one that involved a real estate mogul trying to use his wealth to bankrupt his wife, to take custody of their children. It was a story Issa understood in her bonds. Her assistant buzzed her. "Ms. Monroe, Valentina Rossi is on line 1. She says it's urgent." Udla felt a familiar prickle of apprehension. Valentina's calls were rare and never trivial. She picked up the receiver. "Valentina, what's happened?" "Issa." Valentina's voice was as calm and sharp as ever. "He's back." Isla didn't need to ask who he was. A cold knot formed in her stomach, an unwelcome echo of a life she had long put behind her. "He's back where?" "In Rome. He landed at Baracas this morning. His lawyers have already contacted my office. He's petitioning the court for visitation rights." The audacity was breathtaking. For years, Julian had not sent a single birthday card. He had made no attempt to contact Leo, adhering to the original divorce settlement which had granted exclusive legal and physical custody with no mandatory visitation for him, a concession He had made easily time, desperate to make the scandal go away. On what grounds? Issa asked, her voice dangerously low. The usual, Valentina said with a sigh. He claims she's a changed man. He spent the last few years doing some soul-searching and rehabilitating his character. He says he has a right to know his son. His lawyers are trying to frame our original settlement as something he was coerced into at a time of extreme duress. Duress he completely brought on himself. Isla seethed the anger, burning hot and fast. I take it his ventures in Dubai didn't go well. My sources say he blew through most of his capital trying to launch a new tech startup that failed spectacularly. Valentina confirmed. He's not bankrupt, not by a long shot, but he's no longer in the Novatech stratosphere. He's a diminished man, and diminished men often look to the past to reclaim a sense of power. He is not getting it from me or me son, Issa. Her resolve hardening like steel. Fight him, Valentina. Use everything we have. Of course, Valentina said. But Isla, he's going to try to take this to the media. The desperate plea of a father. He will try to paint you as the cold, vengeful woman keeping a son away from his repentant father. You must be prepared for that. The warning came too late. By the time I deluded home that evening, the first salvo had already been fired. A source close to Julian Vaughan had leaked a story to a major tabloid. The headline was sickeningly predictable. Repentant mogul returns to Spain to fight for son he never knew. The article was a masterpiece of manipulation, full of quotes about deep regret and his unconditional love for a child he hadn't seen in paparazzi photos. Sophie was waiting for her in the penthouse, her face a storm. The snake has come out of hiding, she spat, holding up her tablet, showing her the article. How dare he? It's a tactic, Soph. He's trying to get to me to force a reaction. Issa, taking off her coat. She went to the window, looking out at the city lights. She felt the old rage, the familiar sting of betrayal. But it was different now. It was a controlled burn, not a wildfire. She was no longer the woman who broke down. She was the woman who strategized. The next few weeks were an exhausting war of attrition. Waged through lawyers and press releases, Julian gave a carefully staged interview to a sympathetic television journalist. His eyes filled with practiced sincerity. Ash spoke of his mistakes and his longing to be a father. He looked older, his face thinner, the trademark charisma now tinged with a desperate edge. He never attacked Ida directly, but instead painted her as an understandably he hoped would one day find it in her heart to forgive him for their son's sake. It was a brilliant performance. Public opinion fickle began to fluctuate. Online comments began to question whether it was right to keep a son from his father forever, regardless of the father's past sins. Isla, following Valentina's strict advice, remained silent. She gave no interviews. She issued no statements. She continued her work. She was photographed taking Leo to the park and presented a facade of serene, unshakable confidence. Her silence was more powerful than any denial. It communicated that Julian Vaughan's drama was beneath her. The first court hearing was a circus. Media swarmed the courthouse steps. Julian arrived in a somber suit, looking like a man ready to emulate himself. Issa arrived flanked by Valentina Rossi, her expression unreadable, her gaze fixed straight ahead. Inside the judge's chamber, the arguments were laid out. Julian Slauer spoke of a father's fundamental rights. Valentina Rossi spoke of a father who had abdicated those rights the moment he boarded a plane to the Amalfi Coast. Chas spoke of 4 years of complete and total silence, of the lack of any financial or emotional support beyond what was corded. She painted a picture not of a repentant father, but of a failed businessman, grasping for a new lifeline, a new way back into the public eye, using his son as a pawn. Then Valentina played her trump card, a ghost from Julian's past, whom Isa never thought she'd hear from again. "Your Honor," Valentina said, "we would like to submit a sworn statement from Miss Elena Santoro." A stunned silence fell over the room. Face went white. Valentina continued, "Miss Santoro, who is currently residing in Seville under her married name, has provided a statement detailing how Mr. Vaughan pressured her into signing an NDA after their divorce, paying her a substantial sum to remain. More pertinently, it details numerous conversations during their teamatogether in which Mr. Vaughan referred to his unborn son as a complication and a future obligation. He expressed zero interest in the child beyond the heir who was expected to produce. His trip to the Amalfi Coast, she states, was specifically planned as one last fling before he was tied down. There was never any intention of returning for the birth. Valentina let the words hang in the air. The sworn statement systematically dismantled Julian's narrative as the grieving, repentant father. It exposed him for what he was, a narcissist whose only regret was getting caught. The judge, a woman in her 60s, read the affidavit. Her expression grew colder with each page. She looked at Julian, a long assessing stare. "Mr. Vaughan," the judge said, her voice dripping with disapproval, "you gave up your right to a say in your son's life 4 years ago. Your recent return and sudden interest feel less like paternal concern and more like a publicity stunt. The court's petition is denied. My advice to you is to return to the life you have built and leave this family in peace." It was over. The gavel came down with a final decisive thud. Julian sat stunned, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. His gambit had failed. He had underestimated her. He had underestimated all of them. Valentina walked out of the courtroom into the flash of cameras. Isa didn't smile. She simply held her head high and got into her car. As she drove away, she saw Heimerge's face, crumpled in defeat, surrounded by reporters, yelling questions he couldn't answer. For a fraction of a second, their eyes met across the chaotic scene. She saw no remorse in his gaze, only the bitterage of a king who had lost his kingdom for a second and final time. That night, after putting Leo to bed, Isa poured 2 glasses of wine and sat with Sophie on the terrace overlooking the park. "To victory," Sophie said, raising her glass. "And to Elena Santoro, who knew she'd end up being our secret weapon." Isa smiled, a genuine tired smile. "People change, Soph, or maybe they just get tired of the lies." She sipped her wine, the cool liquid, a soothing balm. "He's gone for good this time. What do you think he'll do now?" Isel looked out at the endless sea of city lights, at the empire of glass and steel. It was Acity that had witnessed her fall and her rise. "I don't know," she said honestly. "And for the first time, I genuinely don't care." She had faced the ghost of her past and not flinched. She had protected her son. She had defended her peace. The echoes of Julie and Vaughan were finally fading, replaced by the sounds of her own life, the gentle hum of her foundation doing its work, the distant laughter from her son's room, and the steady, sure beat of her own heart. Her rise was complete. She was shown. Isila's story is a raw and powerful reminder that the deepest betrayals can forge the most unshakable strength. She was pushed to the brink, abandoned at her most vulnerable. Yet she refused to be a victim. Instead, she transformed her pain into power, not just for herself, but for countless others. Her journey shows us that true wealth is not measured in stock price or penthouses, but in resilience, integrity, and the courage to rebuild your kingdom from the ashes of a life that was burned to the ground.